Hi, everybody. It's Joe Cioffi. You know what? I'm just going to switch these lights off. They can be distracting. Okay? I don't want you to see the halos that are sitting over my head. Hope everybody's having a really good day. Let's talk about what's going on this morning with Harvey as the pressure continues to drop. The last I saw a minute or two ago was 947, I believe. But as someone just posted here, Ruin Nation, saying 943, and let me see if there's a new recon out. There's a couple of things going on, by the way. The pressure in this would definitely support a Category 3 hurricane. I mean, we're only talking right now at this point, we're talking about the wind increasing 5 more miles an hour. All right. The bottom line is that this is going to be a devastating event for Texas, for coastal Texas and inland, with the storm surge, of 10 feet or more, the heavy rains of running on the order of 1 to 2 feet. I mean, that's just not going to. There's not going to be any change in that at all. So from that standpoint, it's pretty much going to be the outcome, regardless of whether we technically get to a 3 or not. And with the pressure, if it just dropped another 5 millibars, I'm just checking. There's a new recon mission that just started out, so it's not quite there yet. So I'll monitor this as we go through everything here this morning. Now, one of the things that's happened in terms of the structure is that we have developed a concentric eye. And I'm going to see if we're going to pull up the satellite here. Yep, there it is. And you can see how well developed this eye is. It stands out so well on the visible satellite loop this morning. The hurricane has got that almost textbook classic circular look. But one of the things that's happening with the eye is the fact that it's developed concentric eyes. In other words, there's two eye walls. And sometimes what happens in storms that have concentric eyes is that the wind field doesn't often match up with the pressure. If we've got pressure in the low 940s, you certainly would be able to you've seen hurricanes with pressure in the low 940s with winds of 115, 125 miles an hour easy, sometimes even higher. But that concentric eye wall kind of spreads things out a little bit, so it takes the winds can wind up being maybe a shade lower, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it won't play catch up at some point. So we could very well. Sometimes the pressure falls, and it takes a while for the wind to catch up to that. The pressure's falling so quickly. But we've just seen a 5 millibar drop, if that's the case, and I would suspect that you're probably going to see these winds get upped a bit as we get some observations from the Air Force reconnaissance aircraft. So a lot going on here with regards to Harvey. What we're going to talk about today is, now that it's going to be going inland. Sometime during the early morning hours of Saturday, or perhaps even a little bit later than that, maybe not till daybreak, depending on when this slowing occurs in its track, what's going to happen. You're going to see a hurricane that's barely going to make it inland. That means that it could wind up holding tropical storm strength for 2, 3, or even 4 days if it's just sitting right near the coast with that circulation over water for a very, very long period of time. So this is not only going to prolong hurricane conditions along the coast for much longer than they otherwise would be for something that would be moving inland, say, at 15 or 20 miles an hour, but the rain is going to be devastating across East Texas. You're going to have 4 days of this, and weather models, some of them indicating that this could wind up turning eastward with what's going on upstream and going back out over the Gulf of Mexico, over the northwestern Gulf, and even some models are even strengthening it when it does that. So this is going to be a long weekend and a long first part of next week with regards to Harvey. So let's get the video rolling, and you can take a look at the meteorology that's going on, and we'll be back at the end, and we'll yap. We'll start with the visible satellite loop, which is really looking very impressive this morning. You can see this well-defined eye that has now appeared, and it's holding with respect to Hurricane Harvey as it continues on a track toward the northwest. It looks like it's slowing down just a little bit to about 8 miles an hour. Going to be following with the eye definable. It makes it a little easier to figure out the motion. So we're going to see what happens as it gets closer to the coast. If it starts to wobble a little more northwest, so just somewhere in here between Corpus Christi and probably Port Lavaca or Port O'Connor, somewhere in here, we're going to see landfall near the Middle Texas coast, and we're already seeing gales along the coast. I saw that there was a report from the Corpus Christi Naval Air Station. I used to live actually right behind that Naval Air Station, and they had some gusts to gale force in the last hour. Rains have already moved onto the coast, and we'll look at the radar here. First, the radar out of Brownsville. You can see the well-defined eye offshore, and it's not close to the shore either. As most of the hurricane is still way out. It looks like just the first bands have been reaching the immediate coastline, with some lighter rains moving inland. And we'll see if we can sort of follow that eye, just kind of inching northwest or even northwest. We'll let me center it just a bit better. You can see it right in there. And there's some heavy bands that are down over Padre Island and sweeping north to south. Here's the Corpus Christi radar, and let me make sure I got the latest one. And the eye is now visible on the Corpus Christi radar. Here's Corpus Christi itself with some of these rain bands beginning to move in, and there's some heavier rains that are further inland as you go northward along the coastline. So pretty impressive looking hurricane we got here. It is from the last recon report that we saw. The pressure was down to 948 millibars and still dropping at about 2 millibars an hour. So we're in this second phase of rapid strengthening as it approaches the coast. Here's the water vapor imagery. I don't see any dry air around. It looks pretty much content in its own little world. We also are watching, of course, convection that's developing across parts of southwest Florida, down to the Florida Keys and in the Florida Straits, and this is going to be part of low pressure that's going to develop there, and we'll see if that winds up becoming something tropical. Notice the tropical Atlantic, not really too much going on there. There's a lot of dry air, and here comes the next upper low moving westward in the high layers of the atmosphere, so it's likely to create some strong wind shear, a strong wind shear environment down to at least 20 degrees north. So we're probably going to have hostile conditions for a good chunk of the Atlantic east of 60 west. And here's the wide visible view. Not too much happening out east. Continue to see this increasing convection in southwest Florida down at the Florida Straits. The old frontal zone is hanging off the southeast coast, and of course here's Harvey continuing to move along, going to be making landfall sometime during during the early morning hours, or maybe closer to daybreak on Saturday if it starts to slow down. Now here's the last recon that we have. This was as of, I just refreshed it, 949. I'm sorry, was the last pressure. So during its mission, it went from 958 to 953 to 951 to 949. You've got winds 196 to 113 knots being reported at flight level. So that certainly supports. They're going for a 110. Looks like there were some winds here also. 96 to 113. I don't see. It's hard to tell with these colors, and of course my not so good eyes, whether there's some barbs there indicating winds higher than 113. But this is either a Category 3 or right on the border of it. The intensity guidance, just to give you an idea, a bunch of them take it to Category 3 right before landfall, and then we have that weakening that occurs from 24 hours. It takes it almost to 72 and 84 hours, still maintaining, a lot of these models maintaining tropical storm strength, which is probably a reflection of the fact that the track here is going to be just inland of the coast and then coming to some sort of grinding halt. That seems to be what a lot of the models are indicating here. We're going to show you what's going on with the European first. The European was pretty interesting, I thought. Here's the upper air on the European. So here's this trough that's swinging through the east today. And you've got the jet stream, but the southern part of the jet is not even close. You have a weak ridge here, and this is where Harvey is kind of being steered around that weak ridge. We have a ridge out to its west. Whoops. Let me just shut that off and turn it back on again. Okay, so here's your jet. Here's your high here, upper high here. Here's Harvey, and it's being steered around this upper high, and you have another upper high to its west. It's really basically in no man's land, and this is the reason why it's a worst case scenario for Texas to have this happen, where it may just get to the coast and then just come to a stop. And when we go forward in the upper air, there's the reflection of Harvey right on the coast, right near or just north of Corpus Christi. This is by Sunday evening, believe it or not. I mean, here's Friday night, Saturday night, Sunday night. I mean, can you imagine the rain that's going to fall in the inland spots with that system just not going anywhere? Now, here is the next trough that's diving in. The problem is that it doesn't extend or dig far enough south to pick Harvey up and start moving it toward the northeast. At least that's the model's view, and it's not alone. You would think that here at this point it might just grab it and it misses it. Harvey is still there. It has maybe enough of a pull that the European brings it back out offshore and then brings it inland right into the corner of southeast Texas. Now here in the east, you've got another trough here that develops with an Atlantic low that it's going to develop. I'm going to show you the surface on this in just a second, but you can pick it up here. This is the reflection of the system that the European develops off the southeast coast of the United States. Here's this trough. Now, one of the big differences between this is the European's view, okay? This is what happens with the Canadian, because the Canadian, as always, we talked about this last night, wipes out the East Coast twice a day. The Canadian phases that southern system and that Atlantic system and strengthens it. So you see the difference out. The Canadian phases this, and this is where I think the model is just wrong. And it moves out. The Canadian lifted it up straight north, bringing a hurricane up into New England. Again, the Canadian to me has no value as a forecast tool, even if it's right. It's along the lines of a broken clock being right twice a day. I think the more logical solution is what the European offers and what the GFS also suggests. Here's that system. Here's that upper. Instead of swinging around in a negatively tilted fashion where the trough axis is northwest to southeast, instead of being like this, it's actually more like this, okay? It's progressive, and that causes this thing to get kicked out to the northeast rather than getting lifted northward up the east coast. Again, I think that would be the solution that I would favor at this point. And now the European suggests that the next trough diving down doesn't dive down far enough west where it can pick this up and move it in this direction, which the European has been doing for days. Instead, it moves it more northward up the Mississippi Valley. And you can see it there. And it just kind of gets lost in the sauce over time. Meanwhile, we have a strong jet here in the east, which is going to keep things cooler than average. for the most part, going into the longer range period and over the Labor Day weekend. So why don't I show you what the surface looks like with all of this, with respect to the European model. So here we go. So here we have, there's Harvey, comes inland on the coast. Doesn't really get any much further inland than this on the model. This is Saturday evening at 8 p.m. Here's your Atlantic low that's beginning to develop. Now we have Sunday evening. It drops it straight south and back out over the coastal waters. Your Atlantic low is now off the northeast Florida coast and begins to move northward along the Carolinas. This actually brings the surface low tucked into the coastline, so there may be rains here to deal with along the Carolinas. So we are going to have to watch this. This might wind up becoming a tropical storm closer to the coast than was earlier indicated, where it was a bit further out. Meanwhile, Harvey barely moves. It actually drops southeastward, and the pressure drops again from 991 to 985. This is Monday night. I mean, it's still going to be doing crazy rain in this area at that point. Monday night. Here's Tuesday night. So you see the European, how it kicks that system and deepens it in the Atlantic, but it kicks it out to the northeast, just to the southeast of well, not just to the southeast, but far enough southeast of southern New England where it's not a problem. Harvey deepens to a 973, so the European suggests it could become a hurricane again, maybe a Cat 1 or a Cat 2, or it goes back inland in southeast Texas, and this thing also wraps up south of Nova Scotia and then moves northeastward. I'm going to go a little wider for my Nova Scotia, Newfoundland audience up in the Canadian Maritimes to see what the European has with respect to this. We'll go to the North Atlantic view. And it actually does bring a hurricane, offshore Nova Scotia and on the edge and getting very close to the southeastern tip of Newfoundland before it moves away to the northeast. And earlier in the week, you had the European developing something in the tropical Atlantic, but with that upper low present, I'm thinking that that's not going to be the case. The GFS, for what it's worth, and sometimes it's not worth very much, actually does the same sort of thing with Harvey, in that it stalls it, kind of drops it back just offshore, and sits it there while it has a low riding up just offshore the Carolinas, and the low goes out. The GFS doesn't do very much with that at all, and it has Harvey back in near Houston on a slow crawl into northeastern Texas, and then it just gets absorbed by this frontal system that develops out to the west. I want to just take a look at the longer range upper air if we can. And let me just widen out. Okay, so all right, so you know the premise with Harvey's is the GFS, again, also like the European, drops this in, but it doesn't extend far enough south to pick it up, misses it. The next trough is going to be, is forecast to just be too far to the east. In fact, the GFS signature of that trough is much weaker than the Europeans, and here comes another trough that it swings down toward Lake Winnipeg, picking up the remnants of Harvey, and then that upper vortex deepens. This is a pretty cool pattern that is setting up on the GFS for the longer term. So let's switch over now, and we'll chat for a little while. By this time, we'll probably have all the latest advisories and the advisory from the Hurricane Center, and we'll see what they're doing with all of this. And we'll go over that, take a look at a few other things, and just sit tight. Let me just make the switch here. Doing with all of this, and we'll go over that. Okay, so I'm back. We, I went through the advisory, just to reiterate the fact that we're probably going to see, this strengthening trend. It certainly still has time to intensify even further. The latest recon has not gone out far enough that it's going in now, the new flight mission. So they're not close yet. So we're not going to get any new obs in time for this. Just a couple of notes. This. Oh, sorry, folks. My dog is being evil today. When we do these videos, I have to confine him to the kitchen, and he doesn't particularly care for that. So anyhow, we kick save and a beauty. All right. So we're going to. I'm going to be watching the weather models today for a couple of trends. One is we're going to see is this new recent trend of bringing Harvey inland, then back out over the coastal waters, and possibly strengthening again, heading up more toward southeast Texas, toward Houston, Galveston, and so on, and maybe even into southwest Louisiana, and then eventually taking it straight north because of the fact that it misses the influence of the next two troughs that are dropping southward. So that's going to be one thing that I'm going to be paying attention to. The other thing is the East Coast. What is going to happen in that old frontal boundary where the southern end, we have the remnants of what was 92L, and that is flaring up in terms of thunderstorms over South Florida down into the Florida Straits. The models would suggest that the upper trough that's coming down out of Canada and into the Great Lakes will not pick up the reflection of that system off the coast and phase it together and then lift it northward the way the Canadian model showed it. That seems to be a very unlikely scenario. The NAM, for what it's worth, does not go out far enough at this point. So we're going to, I want to just take a look at the NAM upper air really fast. Actually, I don't even have to do that. I can just kind of, let me get the surface thing first. Let me just get the end of the surface up, because the NAM does develop, it does develop a low right along the northeast Florida coast and then begins to move it northeastward from there. Has some rain into the coastal Carolinas by Monday night, but it would seem to me, looking at the upper air with the NAM, that we're going to wind up swinging that more to the east, rather more to the northeast rather than to the north. That upper low drops down, acting as a kicker for that system. They got to phase. If there's, you have to have that trough just kind of line up along 90, and it's got to phase with that the short wave that's off the southeast coast, and then tilt it almost east-west. That would bring something right up the coast, and only the Canadian model shows that, and we know how we feel about the Canadian model. Now, for those of you who are watching from the Canadian Maritimes, I might want to pay a little bit of attention to this. The European does make it a close call for southeastern Newfoundland, assuming that we do get the kind of development that the European has. And if we compromise the Canadian with its silliness from last night, and last night it took out all of last night it took out all of Long Island and New England. Every day it's just a ridiculous adventure with that model. So who knows what it's going to do today? It'll be the next mystery that I'm going to want to resolve here. What is it going to do today? Let me get to a few of your comments. Nate Schuler, thank you so much for being here. Let's see. So where is it going past 78 hours? Asked Sanyan Hernandez. It may still be just inland of the coast, somewhere between Port O'Connor and Corpus Christi, or Port Lavaca and Corpus Christi, somewhere in there. It's been so long since I've been there. I worked there back from 1982 to late 1983. I lived actually on North Padre Island at the time. It was really nice, right behind the Naval Air Station. Beautiful there along the Gulf Coast with the beaches. Yes, and the advisory does. The Hurricane Center does actually. The Hurricane Center indicates that because of its proximity to the coast and the possibility that it may move back out over the water, they're actually in their forecast keeping it a tropical storm, right? At tropical storm strength right through Wednesday. And you know what? It's entirely conceivable, but that is the case. Christopher, on the discussion for Taunton NWS, said they will watch 92L because they said it will get close to the 40 and 70 benchmark. Well, look, if we, as I described on the upper air and with what I was just saying about the Canadian, if you have a trough dropping down into the upper Midwest that phases with the upper air energy that's going to be along the southeast coast, if it phases with that, then yeah, you're going to have a really close call in the Northeast. But that is the only model that is doing that is the model that is the absolute most least reliable of the bunch. I mean, and if it winds up being right, it'll be, to me, in my view, it'll just be the idea of a broken clock being right twice a day. The European, to be fair, the European was more tucked in on the overnight run off the southeast coast, and it was a little more northwest, although still far enough offshore where it would not be an issue. But I'm not going to completely discount the possibility that it could happen. Because we have a long way to go. When you have all this energy running around in the upper atmosphere, there's liable to be something wrong somewhere. Well, one trough is going to be stronger than forecast, one is going to be weaker than forecast, and how all of those interact, the timing of all these systems with so many of them running around. If one changes, it's going to change everything behind it and everything ahead of it. So it's going to be every run that we're going to look at is going to have a variation. Again, the key will be whether we get a trough phasing, the two energy streams phasing to some degree, which will allow anything off the southeast coast to move closer to the coast. I rate it as a long shot at this point. Sanyan Hernandez, so no chance of it going back into the Gulf and heading somewhere else. No, there is a chance of it heading to the back. There is. Several models do bring it back out over the open waters of the Gulf of Mexico off the central Texas coast, and then bring it northeastward to somewhere between Galveston and Beaumont. So that is a possibility that it could do that. So this is going to be, with respect to Harvey, this is going to be we're going to be talking about this for a long time. We're not, it's not inland done and then after a day or so, we're on to the next one. We're going to be talking about Harvey through the weekend and through the start of next week. Delvin, you want those 50s and 60s so badly, don't you? It's nice here. We're seeing below average temperatures. Those troughs coming in to New England are going to bring some cool shots. So along the way, I honestly, because of the hurricane, I haven't given too hard a look at the long range because I haven't had that much time. Maybe I'll do that a little bit later on. Houston still hasn't upgraded their drainage. Thought they were going to do that after Ike. Well, Metal Mastodon, having lived in New Orleans and I wasn't there with Hurricane Katrina. I was there in the mid-1980s. They were forever upgrading the levees, and they never did. And we saw the outcome of that. I wonder whether that, knowing how New Orleans, Louisiana politics works, I wonder whether that was ever done. Because if it hasn't been done, or if it wasn't done right, when the next Katrina shows up, and it eventually will, I'm not saying now, it may not be this year or next year or in the next 10 years, but somewhere along the line, there will be another one like that or another one like Betsy. And when that happens, we'll see what the outcome is. Delvin, weather on Labor Day long range. I didn't give, the European was trying to bring this thing up the west side of the Appalachians with the remnants of Harvey. That's kind of changed a bit. So I'm not 100% sure how it's going to play out toward the end of the week. Again, I've been very ultra short-term focused, so I haven't given a lot of time to the long range. One of the things that happens with forecasters, by the way, you should realize that when there's a big short-term event, we really kind of shut things off after the third or fourth day because we're so focused on those first three or 4 days that we oftentimes don't pay too much attention beyond that. So while Harvey is around and with what's going on off the southeast coast, I'm not going to be able to give you better answers other than being a little bit evasive, because quite honestly, I've been looking at both those things, and there's just only so many hours in the day, and if I spend any more time doing this, my head's liable to explode. So is Harvey the longest hurricane or no? I really don't remember other hurricanes in the past. I mean, I'm not sure what you mean by longest. I mean, in terms of, being duration, absolutely not. I mean, there were a couple of hurricanes. Hurricane Faith is one that comes to mind that was around for almost 30 days. And I think there was one recently in the last few years. I forgot which one that I think might have broken the record for being on the map for the longest period of time. But I have to go back and research that. Maybe Anthony Orr, if he's on here and hears this, can come up. He's usually good with the nostalgia part. Is there a satellite floater view of the eye wall I could throw on the screen? All right, let me see if I can find one. The loop that I show is actually is a floater. I don't know that I can get tighter than that. But let me show you what I have. I don't know if I can get tighter than this. Okay, so this is the recent satellite loop. I'm going to just freshen it up. There we go. So just give it a second here to update. It'll start going in a minute. So you'll be able to see the eye. Let me, while we're doing that, I'm going to take a look if there's a floater. If somebody finds a floater, a really tight floater, you can give me the link to it. See if you can post the link. Even if it doesn't come up, if I can cut and paste it, it might make my life a little easier. Let's see, floater imagery. By the way, if you go to the National Hurricane Center's website, you can access floaters on by clicking on the data and tools on the menu and then clicking on satellite imagery. But I'm not seeing anything. But you can see the eye. You can almost see you see that bulge up here. You could almost see the concentric eye. That eye is very small, very, very small. I'm just trying to see if I can look at it in front of me on the bigger picture. You can almost, if you look really closely, you can see the double eye structure. Okay, so it's kind of like an eye within an eye, and it does show up when you have with intense hurricanes. This is not, it doesn't happen that often. You get hurricanes that get very intense. You often have this concentric eye wall that forms. So one eye degenerates, one eye wall degenerates and falls apart, and a new eye wall develops. And when that happens, there's usually some fluctuation in strength. Even though you might have conditions favorable for strengthening, you may have a bit of a wobble where it kind of stops strengthening or even weakens a little bit by 5 or 10 millibars or whatever it is, and then it might resume the strengthening trend. It does have still some more time to strengthen. If you notice, there's still some miles to go before the eye gets right on the coast, and since it's moving to the northwest and the way the Texas coast bends, it's taking the longer water route, probably the longest water route that it can take with regards to getting to the Texas coast. I am going to be really interested to see what happens when it gets near the coast and where the slowdown begins to take place. How far inland does that eye get? Hard to say. Hurricane Tina. I don't know. Marquise, I'll have to go back and look when I get a chance. I'll go look in the Hurricane Center archives. R. Becerra. Welcome, by the way. Thank you. Thank you for being here. So happy I found your site. Yours is where I go to now. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. And Cyan, thank you. My next live stream maybe maybe at midnight tonight. I'm going to go fishing tomorrow morning, so I'm probably not going to do a live stream. I got to get my hair cut, so I probably won't do a live stream until Saturday afternoon. So I'll try and see I may not even be able to do a live stream tonight because I have to get up early, but we'll see. Hurricane John, thank you, Anthony Orr. I knew you'd find out. Okay, this is the longest lasting hurricane was Hurricane John in the Pacific, 1994. Started in the East Pacific and then became a typhoon. And in the Atlantic, then we have Hurricane Nadine, 24 days in 2012. Hurricane Ginger, 27 days in 1971. And Hurricane Ginger was an odd one because it moved off the North Carolina coast, moved out straight east, I think it got east of 50 west before it turned around and came back straight westward and wound up back along the North Carolina coast. It really did an incredible loop. It took one of the more unusual tracks that you would see. Yes, Raymond, you're on board late, so you're gonna have to watch it on the replay from the beginning. All right, so folks, I'm going to leave it there. I'll see how I feel tonight. I just may not have time to live stream because I've got an early day on Saturday. I might do something. I'll try and do something really quick, but if I do, I won't be chatting at the end like I did last time. And tomorrow, the first live stream, the earliest it would come would be sometime about 1 or 2 o'clock. I will post the time as soon as I have an idea of when that's going to happen. Trish and Lou wanted any Nicole shots yet? Well, I mean, these shots that are coming down for this time of year are nice. There's nothing cold yet. We still have to get a little deeper into September because of that. Steve Adley, possible 35 inches in terms of rainfall. You know what? I kind of have this view that after a certain number, it sort of becomes meaningless to try to pick an upside. I'm saying 1 to 2 feet of rain in some spots. I'm sure there's going to be some amounts higher than that in some places. I'm not going to trying to pick what the top number is impossible. But I certainly could see every bit of 1 to 2 feet of rain, and some places are going to get more than that, and that's going to mean some devastating flooding. So let's keep it in the 1 to 2 feet range. I think we get the idea. If we're saying 1 to 2 feet and somebody winds up with 30 inches or more, you can't really fault the forecaster for saying, well, you said we were going to get 2 feet of rain and we got 3 feet. Okay, really? I mean, I've never seen 2 feet of rain. I don't even know what that looks like. So if you get 2 feet or 3 feet, I wouldn't know the difference. The flooding is catastrophic either way. So let's not try and pick upsides here. I kind of feel the same way about snow with that. After about a foot, when you're forecasting a foot or more, I think people get the idea that if you wind up with 2 feet, it's in that range. Okay. Do you think before it hits Houston? Okay, Karina, let's be clear now. That's a big if. So we have to see how it behaves once it moves inland, if it moves back out over the water. The European would suggest that it would strengthen back to a hurricane. Even the GFS did suggest that too, that it would be able to strengthen back into a minimal hurricane, a Cat 1 certainly, and move northeastward. But it's not written in stone yet that that's going to happen. We're going to literally have to watch this constantly in terms of what models are telling us and what's going on with the upper air. It's going to be we're going to fly by the seat of our pants with this. And Cyan Hernandez, the 99 cents a month, that thing, that's I have a subscription app. If you're in the New York, New Jersey, Long Island, Connecticut, Hudson Valley, and Eastern Pennsylvania, you can download my free app and subscribe to my forecast which costs just 99 cents a month. It buys me a cup of coffee every once in a while and a little bit of gas money. So, if you live in the New York, New Jersey, Long Island, Connecticut, Hudson Valley, Eastern Pennsylvania area, you can go ahead and do that. If you live elsewhere, there are other forecasters that might be covering your particular zone that you can subscribe to. The app is free, and that app is going to be upgraded in a big way in the coming months, as I've been told. There's going to be a lot of new things on it. So when I find out exactly where that's going, I will let you know. No, Arseny, the hurricane has not made landfall yet. It's still a good 12 to 20 hours before any kind of landfall. Yes, Bill Gooden, I need a haircut, and I have to do. I have to. By the way, I got to get the gray dyed back in. I have the colorist dyes the gray in perfectly, and your relationship with your colorist is sacred. Okay. Actually, the guy who cuts my hair, I found him a few years ago, and after a long time of frustration with apparently the new thing is to cut people's hair and do it while you're on the cell phone. I mean, you're holding a scissor in your hand and you're cutting my hair, or worse, someone was trying to actually give me a shave while talking on the cell phone. I walked out. So I finally found somebody who not only gives great haircuts, but does and shaves, but does it without being on the cell phone at the same time. So you find somebody like that, you keep them. Okay, let's see. Seeing DirecTV added 2 channels for Harvey. Oh, very cool. I didn't even know they did that. Yeah, Bill, you dye yours gray too, so you understand what I'm getting at. So if you find somebody that dyes it in as perfectly as the person who dyes in mine, you're in good shape. All right, folks, listen, have a great day. I got to get ready for work. We'll try and live stream tonight around or just after midnight for a short time to update you on what's happening. All right, have a great rest of your Friday. And if you don't come back this weekend because you're away for the weekend and you're doing things, I hope you have a great weekend.